That's right, gals and ghouls. It's spooky season. And what better way to celebrate that here on the channel than with pro wrestling's monsters and madmen from the 1980s and 1990s. So, first up is a team that traveled all over the world, but they had their greatest success in the World Wrestling Federation in the early 80s, managed by Captain Lou Albano, where they became 3-time World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Champions, talking about Afa and 𝐃𝐿𝐴, the Wild Samoans. Now, you can't talk about madmen and monsters without talking about Abdullah the Butcher. Abdullah was big in the territories with tours of World Class, would show up in the NWA. Basically, he was a gun for hire. The managers would bring him in to take people out, guys like Paul Jones, Gary Hart, and of course, Abdullah's biggest rival, none other than the ultimate mercenary, Bruiser Brody. Bruiser did have some famous stints here in the U.S., most notably in World Class, but he had his biggest runs in Japan, where he would actually go into the crowd and swing a chain. If that's not a monster, I don't know what is. Also had a notable run in the AWA as King Kong Brody, managed by none other than Sheik Adnan Al-Kaisi. Another man who would make his name in World Class, as well as Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, where he feuded with the likes of Jimmy Valiant and his alter ego, Downtown Charlie Brown, usually managed by Playboy Gary Hart, the great 𝐾𝐿𝐴. 𝐾𝐿𝐴 was also an early proponent of the famed poison mist, used to this day by wrestlers such as Asuka in the WWE. Also in the 1980s, Florida was still a hot territory. And who was the leading heel? Kevin Sullivan, who worshipped a Buddha Dean and would put other wrestlers under his thrall, such as Luna Vachon, Woman, and even all-American wrestlers like Bob Roop, who you can see here as Maha Singh. Also in the 1980s, another wrestler who would run roughshod over World Class, Mid-South, and ultimately the WWF. Had a big angle on Saturday night's main event, breaking Hulk Hogan's ribs, and ultimately leading to a main event match at WrestleMania 2. Another monster coming into prominence in the late 80s was the One-Man Gang. He also had runs in World Class and Mid-South. Mid-South became the UWF, and the One-Man Gang was one of only 4 men to hold the UWF Championship in what was considered to be the toughest federation at that time. He would go to the World Wrestling Federation, where he most notably was on a 5-man team captained by Andre the Giant at the first Survivor Series, and then would basically morph into Akeem the African Dream and end his monster days. You can't talk about wrestling monsters without talking about the Ugandan headhunter / giant Kamala. Kamala was successful in every territory he wrestled in, one of the greatest gimmicks of all time. Wrestled in World Class, Mid-South, Memphis, multiple tours of the World Wrestling Federation, feuding with the biggest stars like Andre the Giant, who he did body slam, Hulk Hogan, and in the 90s, The Undertaker. Closing out our 1980s monsters are the legendary Road Warriors, Animal and What a Rush, Hawk. They dominated tag team wrestling in the 80s, just barreled over their opponents, whether it was the NWA, AWA, Japan, and they would turn into fan favorites, just too cool not to. They would have another run as rule breakers, as the term was back then, in 1988, when they turned on Sting in a 6-man tag team match. They would also inspire other teams like Demolition and the Powers of Pain. We move into the 1990s with the debut of an absolute legend. Rest in peace. The Undertaker makes his televised debut at no less an event than the Survivor Series, where he dominates the other team, which includes the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Immediately pushed to the top, initially managed by Brother Love, then, oh yes, Paul Bearer. Don't really even have to talk about this man's career, one of the all-time legends. Undertaker would, of course, become very popular and fight the likes of Kamala, as we just said, and this man. Huss, the Berserker, formerly known as the Barbarian in Mid-South, Nord the Barbarian in the AWA. Obviously a tribute to Bruiser Brody, who we talked about earlier. Just one of those 90s WWE characters. His most notable moment, trying to stab The Undertaker with a sword on WWF Superstars. The early 90s also saw the debut of the mysterious voodoo character, Papa Shango. I'll admit, not one of my favorite characters, but they were definitely behind him, as he made none other than the Ultimate Warrior look weak and scared. Now on the WCW side of things, you had, oh yeah, Vader. Vader would take over as the top man, following the departure of Ric Flair, would hold the WCW World title multiple times, trading it with Sting, beating Ron Simmons, and would hold the belt again multiple times through 1993 until Ric Flair finally came back, and they had a match at Starrcade 93 where Flair won, but Vader really took it to him, as he said in the post-match interview. We now get into the mid-90s, where a new federation is making its mark. That is, of course, Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, all kinds of chaos. But at the forefront of that, the late, great Sabu, guy who basically originated the table spot, as far as I'm aware of, just did all these crazy moves, probably did not help him later in life, but jumping from the chair to the top rope to outside the ring, had a crazy, bloody match, Born to be Wired, with Terry Funk. Just one of the legends of hardcore wrestling, and a complete madman who would use crazy glue to close up his cuts. Two other men just causing a path of destruction in ECW, the late great Terry Funk and Cactus Jack Mick Foley. I mean, I don't have to say much here. They had many wars on both sides of the fence, and I mean, this picture of Terry trying to get a cactus with a flaming branding iron says it all. And you can't talk about the 90s without the debut of, by God, it's Kane! And that was a horrible Jim Ross impression. This was obviously a spin-off of The Undertaker. They both teamed and feuded, Brothers of Destruction, and they were very successful with Kane. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, do me a solid and hit that like button, and check out some of my other videos.